Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's virtual town hall meeting brought to you by IOFM and sponsored by Bottomline, Bill, and onPhase. My name's Mark Brousseau, president of Brousseau and Associates. It's my pleasure to be your moderator for today's webinar. We know that AP leaders have lots on their plates these days, and managing all the changes with new ways of working, new technologies, new risks, and new expectations can be overwhelming. You probably have lots of questions about what's the best approach for dealing with it all. Well, during today's event, we're going to provide you with our expert guidance. We've assembled an all-star panel of industry experts to provide you with their insights, recommendations, and anecdotes on how it is your peers are managing the daunting challenges we face today. This is your forum to ask your questions of our expert panels. I have just a few housekeeping notes to go over before we officially get started. If you need any technical assistance, we first recommend refreshing your browser. If you continue to have technical questions or issues using the On24 platform, please use the Q&A box and someone will respond to you as soon as they can. There is no call-in number for today's virtual town hall meeting. To connect, you have to access either via computer, a tablet, or cell phone audio. To ensure call quality, everyone's voice lines have been muted. So you don't miss any shared content or an opportunity to share valued feedback with us, we recommend you enable pop-ups within your browser. For your convenience, everything in the On24 console is fully customizable. So you can move things around, resize the window. You can even turn on captions for the event. At the bottom of your console, you'll also find a resources box where you can download any additional content for today's presentation. Importantly, we want you to be prepared to answer polling questions during the town hall meeting. The polls will appear in the slides window during the town hall meeting. Please choose from the multiple choice answers and hit submit to send your poll responses to me. We'd love to have your participation and your insight. Speaking of questions, as I said, this is your forum to ask your questions of our panelists. You can ask a question at any time during the town hall meeting by submitting it through the Q&A box. In fact, let's test it out right now. I want everyone to open up the Q&A box on their screen. Yep, do it right now, everyone. We're waiting. Okay, good. You've got it open. I want you to type in, what is the single biggest challenge facing your AP department today? Pound submit and send it to me right now. What's the single biggest challenge facing your AP department today? Throughout the webinar, you'll have the opportunity to submit your questions to us. So don't feel like this is your only chance to be able to ask your questions. And finally, today's virtual town hall meeting will be recorded. You'll receive a thank you email with the on-demand materials within the next couple business days. We encourage you to share it with your peers and your coworkers. With all of that out of the way, now it's time to meet our panelists. I've asked each of them to give you a 30-second adjective-free description of how it is their company comes at today's discussion. First up is Kolleen. Kolleen, welcome aboard.
Thanks, Mark. Hello, everyone. I'm Kolleen Doucette. I'm VP of Corporate Development over at onPhase, and I've been with onPhase for over 10 years now. At onPhase, we don't just automate AP, we really modernize the office of the CFO. And we've been in this space for over 25 years and have learned from our own customers that many finance tools still leave teams managing fragmented systems and manual workarounds. And we make sure that we partner with our customers to deliver complete financial transformation, all the way from data capture through payments and everything in between. So happy to be here today.
Great to have you with us, Kolleen. Noel?
Hi, everyone. My name is Noel English. I'm here representing Bill. I've been at Bill for about 9 years now. Bill, or also known as Bill.com, is a cloud-based financial operations platform that simplifies, digitizes, and automates back-office financial processes for small and medium-sized businesses. And our mission is really to make it simple to connect and do business. So we make paper-based manual transaction processing obsolete by transforming how our customers manage their cash inflows through accounts receivable and outflows through accounts payable and spend management, creating efficiencies and then freeing up our customers to run their businesses and do what they love to do best.
Thanks for joining us, Noel. And finally, Andy.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. Hi, everybody. I'm Andy Sullivan. I am with the Paymode division of Bottomline. Paymode is an invoice-to-pay automation solution. We work through both a direct sales team and also partner with multiple banks and FIs. I manage the sales teams that partner with our bank partners. We're helping companies move from paper checks and invoices to a more efficient, automated, and fraud-free process by paying vendors through a secure ACH network called Paymode.
Thanks so much for joining us, Andy. It's clear that Kolleen, Noel, and Andy have a wealth of knowledge about accounts payable, whether it's supplier onboarding, invoice management, supplier payments, or vendor information management. They're prepared to answer your questions. So I want you to fire up the Q&A tool on your screen and submit the burning question that is on your mind about your operations now. What is it that you would love our panelists to help provide you with some guidance on? Go ahead, type your question into the Q&A tool, pound the submit button, and send it to me now. While they're doing that, let's go ahead and launch our first poll question, which is now displayed on your screen. We want to know, which of the following functions is your top accounts payable automation priority for the next 12 months? Which of the following functions is your top AP automation priority for the next 12 months? Is it supplier onboarding? Is it invoice capture and workflow? Is it supplier payments? Is it fraud detection and compliance? Or are you not planning to automate any further? Take a moment to respond to the poll question now displayed on your screen, and we'll discuss the results in just a moment. Kolleen, when you're talking to AP leaders, what do they tell you is keeping them up at night?
It's a great question. And right now, what I'm hearing a lot about from different finance professionals is navigating the pace of technology. You know, one of the biggest challenges we're seeing is the sheer pace at which it's moving and how teams can start adopting tools like AI, but a lot of organizations, they don't know where to begin, and they don't know whether it's a true fit for what they should be doing or just a lot of hype going on in the market. So the key is to finding technology that helps integrate with existing systems and delivers real value, but it's definitely a topic of conversation for the organizations we work with.
Kolleen, I hear from a lot of AP leaders that they become paralyzed by it all. There's just so many technologies and so many vendors and so many approaches that when they don't know where to start, they don't. That's a real danger to that, isn't there?
Absolutely. It's something we see all the time. And, you know, my recommendation to these organizations is start by understanding your current process, right? Get it documented so you can understand, you know, what might be the best place to start. And then you can start narrowing down the partners in the market to help fill those gaps.
Andy, it's not just organizations that have no automation that are paralyzed by some of these changes. It's also those that have already done something. They've already deployed some technology, but they know it's not doing everything they need it to do. It can become confusing on how to finish that last mile of automation. Talk to me about that, Andy.
Yeah, 100%. That's one of the biggest challenges we're seeing, like understanding each step of the way. Are the technologies that we're using or implementing sort of focused on what our ultimate priority is and goal? And that's one of the things that we try to talk to our customers about is ensuring that there's prioritization and like keeping the North Star, and not getting distracted by all of these things that seem cool, sound cool, but maybe aren't helping you get to that ultimate goal and priority. And so you see a lot of these, a lot of organizations who have sort of piecemealed And now we're looking at their process and saying this feels clunky, not super efficient, and sort of having to work backwards in a way. So really, I think ultimately trying to ensure that each organization does have a plan and they're working towards the ultimate goal and priority, and not getting distracted by all the potential cool technology, shiny penny stuff.
Yeah, Noel, I think Andy really hit the nail on the head with this piecemeal approach that many organizations have taken to automation. Let's face it, most AP departments have something. Maybe it's outdated OCR technology. Maybe it's a portal for certain suppliers. Maybe it's a little bit of EDI going on. There's typically something going on in an AP department. But what I hear is that this piecemeal approach really isn't good enough anymore. Am I on the right track here, Noel?
Yeah, I would say so. Generally, what we're finding here at Bill is we have a lot of customers that want to utilize our API program, where they're able to take the engines that we provide or even of other providers and be able to build deep integrations and create their own financial ecosystem across the board.
Yeah. Is that becoming easier these days, or is it becoming harder these days, Noel?
Well, given with AI, and AI can pretty much do a lot of coding for you, be able to go through things like the API documentation. But even on the API documentation, if you have really good API documentation, you can run your test calls directly there from within the site. And a lot of things like generating developer keys is now becoming more self-service. So really, you just sign up, you have your developer fire it up and get started on how you want to integrate that.
We asked our attendees which of the following functions is your top accounts payable automation priority for the next 12 months. 43% of you identified invoice capture and workflow as your top AP automation priority for the next 12 months. 1 in 5 of you said it's fraud detection and compliance. 9% of you said supplier payments, 7% said supplier boarding. 18% of you said you're not planning to automate any further. Kolleen, it's interesting to me, 43% of our attendees identified invoice capture and workflow as being their top priority for AP automation in the next year. I mean, we've been at this for quite a while now. Why is invoice capture and workflow still so broken in so many organizations?
You know, I think you said it earlier, Mark, right? There's outdated OCR. OCR has been around for a long time. I think that's the technology, smart capture, I've seen advance the most in the last 2 years alone. And so what we're seeing is a lot of organizations may have started somewhere with something that got them digital, but it's not true automation. And so it makes sense that a lot of organizations are either looking now like, hey, we've got to do something that's outside of email and more formal, but also those ones that may have started somewhere in the past, they're now looking at, okay, how can we continue to streamline? Because what we did this first attempt really wasn't, soup to nuts, if you will. And what we found is invoice capture, that's the part that provides the highest ROI on automation. If you don't capture the information correctly, everything downstream is interrupted.
Yeah, it really is the on-ramp for all this. I'm curious, Kolleen, a lot of AP leaders tell me they struggle with how to raise their hand and tell the boss that the technology that they invested in somewhere in the past just isn't getting it done. Talk to me about the talk track for an AP leader who wants to convince the boss that they need to replace or refresh the technology they currently have.
Yeah, it starts with building a business case, right? And what I mean by that is understanding current state. Where are you and how can we improve? Because even the best automation tools, there's always going to be room for improvement as the organization grows and changes. So it's a natural evolution. A lot of the conversations to start talking about, hey, here's where we are as a business today. We know we want to get here in 5 years, but we can't do the same thing we're doing today. So how can we continue to optimize? We look at it as opportunity to improve and not more of, hey, we failed here, right? Because it's still better than they had before.
Yeah, Andy, 1 in 5 of our attendees said that fraud detection and compliance is their top AP automation priority for 12 months. There's no question. Payment fraud is a huge issue in financial services these days. Just how bad is it out there?
Yeah, it is. To me, I'm actually surprised that the number was that low on the poll. That is really kind of that's the driver for a lot of the organizations that we're talking to move and to do something. The scope of the problem is it's staggering. Business email compromise. So essentially a fraudster going in and hacking and impersonating a vendor and asking for payment to be sent to a fraudulent bank account. Over the stats, like over $350 million a month lost to U.S. businesses in 2024. Like that number is incredible. And so the growth and scope, and not only just like the scope of the problem, but the evolution of fraudsters, they're getting smarter, they're getting more sophisticated. It's so much harder to stay ahead of them. That to me, that's what sort of the top of that's keeping CFOs up at night, and something that they're looking for a real solve to.
More money is lost in the United States each year to business email compromise than to bank robberies. I know bank robberies are far more exciting than business email compromise, but these are the stats. In fact, check fraud. Andy, you and I are old enough to remember when we said, well, if we just get rid of these checks, check fraud would go away. Check fraud is even going up 18% in the past year alone.
24 billion lost in 2024 to check fraud.
What would be your single biggest piece of advice, Andy, to our attendees who are struggling with payment fraud these days?
Well, as far as check fraud goes, obviously automation, moving away from check is the number one solve there. I do think finding organizations, and I'll say this: we talk to a lot of organizations who say, yeah, we've got our process in place. We feel confident that we can detect fraud. We have those conversations, and a year later, they're coming back to us and saying, I think we need to advance and accelerate the conversation we had, because they've either been scared by an attempt or they've actually had a pretty significant fraud loss. We have a client who just came back to us about a month ago that we've been talking to off and on for a year plus. They had a 7-figure loss due to business email compromise. And no fault of their internal team, just that the fraudsters are getting more sophisticated. Like, gone are the days where you see an email with some grammar mistakes or it's a little bit off. It all looks legitimate now. So partnering with a solution who has the technology and the capabilities to detect this and do like a multi-layer fraud prevention process, I think is really important.
Noel, what's the thing you see AP departments commonly doing that makes you cringe from a fraud detection standpoint? We've lost Noel. All right, so Andy, you get to answer that question. What's the thing you see AP departments doing that makes you cringe from a fraud standpoint?
Well, so it's funny. I actually I was at a conference this week and having a couple conversations with some payers in commercial real estate space, and one actually did say that they do not even have a positive pay solution in place for their check payments. That one a little cringy. Like that's step
easy.
One. That at this point, that's table stakes, right? So that was interesting. That was cringy for sure.
Yeah, if you have to cut paper checks, for goodness sake, use positive pay from your bank or fintech.
Yep.
Kolleen, 18% of our attendees said they have no plans to automate further. What would be your message to them?
After being in the industry for over 10 years, I will tell you there are instances while I work with an organization, I say, look, you're not ready for automation. You're doing it pretty well today based on the volumes that you're at. What I will say is they need to start thinking 5 years down the line, right? Manual processes, they're inherently opening up to risk. As Andy mentioned, there's high fraud related to checks. And I know that sometimes organizations still like to feel and sign the checks, and it feels like they have more control when they're processing it in-house. But the reality is fraudsters have gotten very, very smart. And so they have to start thinking that they may be okay today, plan for 5 years, because it's going to come much faster than they think.
Yeah. Noel, Jennifer writes in that her biggest challenge is verifying new vendors and banking information changes for existing vendors. What's the best practice that you would recommend to Jennifer for both onboarding and then managing that vendor data?
Of course, the key piece here today is really around automation. So finding a vendor that's able to do that for you, either check on the back end as far as vendor verification, especially new vendor onboarding. But as pertains to kind of maintaining their banking information, things like that, there are systems that have networks in which, of course, the vendor can manage themselves. But also, if you are doing anything manually where you're getting emails to request changing the bank account, having tools that may require dual approval before that change takes hold, but also manually calling that vendor. It is still a practice that's used very much today, that you should probably reach out, get a hold of that vendor, and make sure that's what they actually sent you, in case you're kind of suspicious in terms of a spoof email or something similar to that.
Andy, what advice would you give to Jennifer for automating her process of verifying new vendors and banking information changes for existing ones?
Yeah, look, obviously those are the two areas where fraudsters can get in, right? You've got a new vendor or a banking change, like that's where fraud creeps in. There are systems that we utilize, like a LexisNexis or a Socure, to help companies validate businesses are who they say they are. Early warning is a system for to help authenticate banking data, something like that. But to note back to Noel's point, like the whole phone validation, right? Have a conversation with the vendor. That's another key step.
Yeah, Andy, I imagine that collecting and storing bank details is a pretty dicey proposition for AP departments these days. Doesn't it make them a target of the fraudsters themselves?
Sure. Yeah, like this is the conversation that we're having every day, because that's one of the things that we're helping payers do is we're now managing that banking data. Everyone wants out of that business. I've yet to have a conversation with a prospect or a customer who finds that the responsibility is worth the risk. Like, they want out of that business. And I can't say I blame them.
Hey, Noel, we know that there's a lot that goes into onboarding a new supplier, just beyond collecting and verifying that bank details. We've got to do the TIN matching, OFAC checking, sanction screening. Heck, we've just got to collect the contact information we need. Talk to me about how I can streamline that process. That's on Victoria's mind.
Yeah, absolutely. So there are systems out there where you're able to send out an invite to that vendor where they fill out those details. They enter in their tax ID information, they're entering in their banking, and then from there kind of managing it moving forward. And then, of course, with that system, typically what they'll do is they'll do all the OFAC sanctions, they'll do all the background checks, may do things like a soft credit check on those vendors. There are also systems out there that are validating vendors. They may ask for things like certificate of insurance. They need some type of signed contract, or they require a W-9 before they can be created and paid within that system. So really just a matter of what your requirements are and making sure that tool that you're going to utilize for that system meets those requirements.
Yeah. Hey, Kolleen, Amy writes in that she's having a challenge getting approvals on her invoices. I mean, I hear anecdotally from AP leaders that it's taking longer these days to get invoices approved. Is that something you're hearing? What's behind it, and how do we fix it?
Absolutely. This is something that's becoming more common because we now all live in email. It's very easy to miss an email. A majority of invoices are sent by email for approval if it's in a manual environment. And so we are seeing those times extend now to get invoices approved and processed and paid for those organizations who have yet to automate. The good news is, through automation, what it does is it really puts ownership on the individuals who need to get things approved, because it's going to be sending out reminders, notifications, and escalations. So if you still have a problem child in the organization, it's going to flag that, and you can send reports out to leadership every week so that the system is notifying everyone, hey, this person needs to get their work done. And naturally, that's going to drive down processing times, because nobody wants to be on that report at the end of every week.
I love you come right out and call him a problem child. That's great. I love it.
Yeah.
Colleen, though, we've been at this a while, you and I. And if you've been around, you know that every vendor says, "Hey, we've got super configurable workflows that speed things along." The reality is a little bit different. Are there some questions you'd recommend that Amy or some of the other folks on the line ask prospective vendors to ensure that the solution they're looking at is truly configurable and will truly help accelerate their workflows?
Yeah, this is definitely one of those catch-22s, right? You want something that's configurable to meet your business needs, but also you don't want to automate a process that's not very good. And so part of the journey of automation is looking at how things are operating in the organization today, start leveraging best practices. And so ask vendors, one, do you have best practices that you've learned from others in our industry that we'd be able to apply to our business? Because that industry experience is always super important. A lot of organizations have done things the same way for so long. You should be leveraging all of the others in the market and industry to figure out what's working well. So that's a question I always educate organizations is, hey, ask about industry expertise and then try to understand best practices for where to start with automation. We'll work with an organization who says, well, we need 20 approvals on an invoice. Well, odds are it's not going to be processed as quickly as you like. We recommend starting slowly because with automation, you have more control and visibility anyways. You might not need that many approvals any longer.
Noel, are there certain things that you would focus in on during a demonstration or conversations with vendors to help ensure that they have the type of workflow flexibility that we need in our departments these days?
Sure, absolutely. Of course, doing an internal review on getting what your requirements are, but also laying those out within the process like, hey, this is what we're looking for, but also kind of bring yourself back down to reality and understand that not everything or not every tool is going to be exactly perfect, but you need to find the best that's going to work for your automation and what you're looking to do. As far as things like approvals, of course, is, what level of approvals do we need? Is this a department level approval? Are we going based off of amount? What's the size of our business? What kind of approvers might we need included on this? Or maybe it's something where the approvals are really more of a purchase request. This is something where maybe we could move to an automated procurement tool that might be able to assist with that.
Yeah. Noel, I imagine that if it's taking longer to get approvals and invoices, it's probably taking longer to close the books these days too. Is that true? And if so, what are some best practices to help streamline that process?
Yeah, absolutely. As far as things like reconciliation and getting that month-end close, is having those automated tools versus, something like where if you're dealing with spend and you have those expense reports and you have to hound people for receipts, having something where your transactions come over in real time as, before the month even closes, you're already working with people on getting receipts in and approvals complete. Additionally, as far as reconciliation, having a solid payment system that really helps manage a lot of that for you, where they're kind of facilitating the payment for you. You're kind of just sending them the funds. And then from there, you kind of already have an idea of what your cash flow looks like. And then your reconciliation is much easier at month-end close.
Andy, when I hear Noel talk about reconciliation, I imagine that he's talking about integration between an AP system and an ERP. We hear a lot of horror stories about AP departments that put in a system that allegedly integrated with their ERP, but didn't really integrate with their ERP. What's going on in the market? I mean, I hear some vendors say they integrate with every ERP or hundreds and hundreds of them. What are some telltale signs that that's not quite right?
No, so it's interesting you say that, and that's one of the, if we sort of go back to one of the comments I made at the onset, is like the trying to find the right technology and and truly understanding, is this gonna work with our existing systems? Put it this way, every ERP has its own instance. Like different organizations have different instances of the same system, and that can throw up roadblocks when you're talking about a truly integrating. So in a lot of ways, like does that technology, does a full integration, so to speak, make the most sense, or does it make more sense to do like a file-based transmission, right, and run it that way? So yeah, it is a challenge. And again, a lot of times, like, you don't know what you don't know until you get into the system and you start implementing and you say, oh, we found a roadblock here, and there's a reason we can't integrate, or we have to make an adjustment. So it's more challenging than certainly a lot of partners will want to say it is upfront, for sure.
Noel Sarah writes in, when doing a verbal verification of banking information with a vendor, is it important to confirm all numbers of routing and accounting numbers, or is confirming just the last 4 digits enough? What would be your advice to my friend Sarah?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, you could definitely verify with the last 4 digits. You could also start with the first 4 digits and leave the in between there incomplete if need be. But it's really dependent on what your level of being comfortable with that type of information is. Because if it is something that you're storing, you want to make sure that is stored securely, so you don't have any type of breaches or anything where now your vendor's information is compromised.
Yeah, you agree with that, Andy?
I do. It makes sense.
David writes in, what are the best low-hanging fruit time-saving strategies in supplier onboarding? Low effort, high reward. Any thoughts there, Andy?
Sorry, Mark, can you repeat the question for me there?
I can indeed. David writes in, what are the best low-hanging fruit time-saving strategies in supplier onboarding? Low effort, high reward.
Interesting question. I might pass that off if you don't mind.
All right, Noel, I know you're dying to answer that one.
Sure, absolutely. So one, of course, is an integration. And what I mean by integration is a direct integration. That's going to be your biggest time saver. And that's usually API based versus file based. And I think we were talking about this a couple minutes ago. And that's one of the things to determine when you're looking for a possible vendor for your automation, is making sure that it is either an in-house built integration, or if it's a third-party integration, or if it's just simply a file transfer where they're giving you a flat file or you have to create your own. So one of those things you have to determine. But that shortcut around the vendor, as far as saving time around vendor onboarding, is just being able to enter in maybe the vendor's name, their email address, and then send out an invite to them so they can take that time on and fill out their details, versus you having to do that across X amount of vendors that you have.
Since we're on the topic of onboarding, let's go to our next poll question. This time I want to know, what's your biggest challenge when onboarding new suppliers? What's your biggest challenge when onboarding new suppliers? Is it collecting complete and accurate information? Is it validating tax IDs or bank account details? Is it ensuring compliance with internal policies? Is it communicating with suppliers? Or is it that you don't have a formal onboarding process? Take a moment to respond to the poll question now displayed on your screen, and we'll discuss the results in just a moment. While they do that, Kolleen, I'm going to take the liberty of re-engineering David's question. I'm curious, what do you believe are the best low-hanging fruit time-saving strategies when it comes to invoice processing? Are there some areas of takeout that we should be focused on when it comes to automating or maybe even improving the technology we already have?
Absolutely. The companies I work with, if you guys are processing PO-based invoices, those have the highest and quickest return because the data exists in the ERP, right? So when we capture an invoice, if we see that everything matches, we can straight through process that invoice. So it's going to have an immediate impact to that accounting team. They're not going to have to process those invoices. And those are the ones that require the most manual touch points, right? Invoice comes in, they're looking in the ERP, looking at the PO data, seeing if it matches manually. A lot of room for error. But with automation, that's all eliminated. So a lot of quick wins when it comes to PO-based invoices. The other is going to be just setting up automated GLs. A lot of organizations are getting in the same utility vendors or rent each month, and they know what those invoices need to be coded to. So having automation that just automatically applies those distributions so that somebody doesn't have to manually do that really helps reduce the time spent on getting invoices processed and approved.
Heather writes in, Colleen, that she's having challenges with approvals as well, like our friend Amy from before. She said, having an automated approval chain in the system doesn't always work. I think this is what I was getting at before. I hear this a lot. What's the most common reason you hear that approval chains just fall down, and how do we fix it?
A lot of times organizations start by keeping the process very similar to how they have it today, which means that they could have a bottleneck with one individual having to process a lot of invoices. So what we would recommend is two things. One, find an individual that can be a delegate for that person so that there's more than one person taking action. But also it comes with reminders and escalations so that we can have visibility. A lot of times it's just around somebody not knowing that they have a lot of invoices. But if there's an automated system in place today, I'd love to learn more from Heather, just understanding, do you have delegates set up? Is there automated notifications? And it might just be that somebody needs a talking to.
A good talking to.
Mark, if I can add to that, one of the best practices that we'll see as far as automating invoices goes is set an amount where there's like an auto approval. If it's below a certain dollar amount, just auto approve it. That's something that our payers are implementing, and that can help strip out a lot of those like high number of invoices that are super low dollar that they're just going to approve automatically, and can really save time and effort.
I like it. You're focusing everybody's efforts on what's really important. That's a good idea. We asked our attendees, what's your biggest challenge when onboarding new suppliers? 46% of our attendees said collecting complete and accurate information. 1/3 of you said validating tax IDs or bank account details. Come on now, Noel. 46% of our attendees said collecting complete and accurate information. What's the problem here?
Yeah, I mean, in general, it's sometimes you're just pulling things off of systems and they've been outdated. They might have moved. Things have been updated. They might have been acquired. And, all just in the general course of business as it is. So this is something where having the vendor being able to manage it would really assist with that in terms of getting through that complete and accurate information, because it's not so much as just entering in one time. Businesses evolve, they change. This is something that needs to be actively managed within a particular type of platform.
Yeah, and right on cue, Sarah writes in that her biggest onboarding challenge is getting payees to complete the W-9 correctly. Isn't it amazing? No, we hear this all the time. And if it slips by, well, it turns into downstream problems, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And this is something where if you have a vendor onboarding tool that's able to request a W-9 or even allow them to digitally file a W-9 where they show the required fields and requires them to fill them out properly in order to submit those over to you so they can get paid.
Yeah.
I'll just say this is part of, someone had asked the question, how do I make the business case up the chain? Like this is the type of conversation to have where if you have AP staff spending this type of time, like validating, revalidating, checking, there are certainly other tasks within the organization that they can be doing that are much more beneficial, potentially revenue generating, versus time spent on chasing down and validating supplier data. This is a huge part of that business case to make up the chain, to automate and bring in a vendor who a portal to help vendor validation.
Stay right there, Andy. Lorene wants to know any strategies for migrating a large number of vendors to ACH. I assume she's cutting a lot of checks these days. What would be your strategy for getting those folks to take electronic payments, ACH or otherwise?
Yep. Look, that's the one thing that we help payers tackle all day, every day. Actually finding a vendor who will help with the onboarding, and like the payer is included in crafting messaging and how that message goes out to their vendors. But there are solutions out there where the onboarding of vendors to from check to ACH is taken over, and that frees up the organization in doing it themselves.
Colleen, what do you think is the biggest mistake organizations make when trying to migrate suppliers to electronic payments?
Probably not doing a good job explaining the value of why they should be doing it, right? And that's where organizations and partners come in, because we have teams that do this behind the scenes, right, all day, every day. And a lot of times what we found is that, one, suppliers just don't know, or they have a fear of change. And so it's our job to educate them on all of the benefits of moving to electronic payment method, whether that's ACH, a virtual card, you name it, right? Suppliers want to be paid faster. They want visibility into where these things are. They want to be able to self-serve information. And through automation, they get all of that. So a lot of the time, it's just us educating them on, hey, you're going to get all of these benefits by just transitioning how you're accepting payment.
Yeah, Noel, I hear from a lot of AP leaders that they struggle with smaller suppliers, the so-called mom and pops, getting them to go to electronic. Is it as hard as people think it is to get them to migrate to electronic? And what are some tips or tricks for getting smaller suppliers to finally break away from checks?
I think Colleen hit the nail on the head. It really just comes around to, letting them know the benefits and the value of it. Like, as of right now, the current economic climate that we're in, payments and getting paid on time in a good, secure fashion is something that's going to be much more important as we continue to move forward. So this is also something we're mentioning where their cash flow is important to them, and we want to make sure they're good to go. So this is something where a paper check is going to take you a lot of time, a lot of money to get that deposited, where if we get you over to an electronic form of payment, might make it easier. But also, if if they're still specific to managing checks, this is something where having a check processor to manage that for you would be a great option.
Andy, I see a couple of questions in the queue here related to virtual cards, all around this concept of, are suppliers still taking them? How do I get suppliers to take them? Where are we in the evolution of virtual cards? I see that the volume's still growing, but what are you finding are the good use cases for virtual cards, and how do we convince suppliers to take them?
Yeah, it's certainly a growing payment type today. Like, that's one of the offerings that we go out to vendors. It's not everyone's going to accept a virtual card. There's value on the back end to some vendors as far as like what remittance detail they're getting and how that comes back to them into their ERP system. So there's value, one, in that, and two, sort of depends. I think it varies by industry too. But if you have a number of payers who are paying the same way, that's a preferred payment type, right? That can help drive relationships with potential customers. So yeah, we're seeing it across the board growing for sure. Yeah, I'll stop there.
No, where do we think we're going with virtual cards? What would be your advice to someone who's on the fence about how much effort they should be putting into migrating suppliers to virtual cards?
Sure. I honestly think it should be up to the supplier and see how they want to get paid. If they prefer that virtual card, maybe they've got a really great system where they get some kickbacks for being able to accept that. Great, go for it. I don't think virtual cards, and just my own personal opinion, I don't think virtual cards are here to stay. I think these are things we'll probably move off of eventually, as the cards can sometimes become complicated. I do think that things like real-time payments that are coming through, we're going to see a little bit more of a move towards that, which can be much faster and less expensive.
Yeah, Colleen, when I think about payments automation, it seems to me we've done a pretty good job of automating payments, right? We're cutting fewer checks these days, but I'm not so sure we've done a great job of optimizing our payments to suppliers. In other words, I wonder sometimes if we've really got the best strategic answer. Would you agree with that? And what's the solution to that?
Definitely agree. And I think that, it really depends on the vendor as well, and the amount that they're getting paid. That helps drive a lot of how they want to receive payment, because with some electronic payment methods, there might be fees that they don't want to pay, but they might want to take that fee on if they need cash flow immediately. So it really depends on the state of the industry at the time and what's going on with these suppliers. And I like what Noel said. I think that a lot of times, like, we need to leave it on the supplier to see how they want to be paid. And that should really drive a lot of how organizations are paying their suppliers, because they want to maintain these relationships. And a lot of these suppliers have been doing business with for 20 plus years.
Andy,
I
Marie,
think
Carmen.
a lot of it too, Mark, does depend on the relationship with the payer, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, how important is it to the payer? How much are they pushing it? Is there potentially a payment strategy they put in place where they're going to pay quicker with virtual card, and maybe 15 days virtual card, 30 days ACH, 90 days check, that type of thing? That you see some of those strategies with payers who are rebate focused, right? And a lot of that does depend on the individual relationship with that payer.
Well, Andy, your timing was impeccable. Marie Carmen was wondering whether we're seeing folks changing their payment terms for more preferable payment methods. Sounds like that's exactly what's happening in some cases.
Yeah, we're seeing it for sure. There's more and more. I think we're seeing payers sort of stepping and putting together a payment strategy and changing the timing based on payment type for sure.
Yeah, we're seeing that a lot as well, with dynamic discounting, where when suppliers are onboarding in the portal, they have the option to say, hey, we want to be paid early and we'll give this % discount, or we'll take this payment method. So it's, I think it comes down to flexibility as well, which a lot of automation tools provide suppliers, is to get that creative with how they want to be paid and when they want to be paid.
Our next poll question is now displayed on your screen. This time I want to know, how long does it typically take to fully onboard a new supplier? How long does it take to typically onboard a new supplier? Is it less than 1 day? Is it between 1 and 3 days? Is it between 4 and 7 days? Is it over a week, or are you not sure? Take a moment to respond to the poll question now displayed on your screen, and we'll discuss the results in just a moment. While they do that, I have a number of attendees who've written in that they're challenged with duplicate invoices. Kolleen, my impression is we're seeing more duplicate invoices these days, largely because it's easier to send them via email than it was to reprint an invoice and stuff it in an envelope and put the postage on it. Are you hearing that organizations are facing more duplicate invoices? And if so, what can we do about this?
We are absolutely hearing that. And in short, it's tough to control suppliers, right? They're going to send it by mail and by email, and maybe multiple methods. And so the only thing to do here is to put in place an invoice check, right, on duplicates. Most automated tools, that's the first step of the workflow, right? Coming in and validating, for this total amount in this supplier and this invoice number, does it already exist? But suppliers love to send invoices more than once, so to ensure that organizations receive it. So it's something I don't see going away at any point.
Andy, does this really speak to the need to provide suppliers with self-service portals to ensure that to get that confirmation thereafter and to even see the status of things?
Yeah, I do. I think that Colleen's right on. I don't think it's going away, and I think it continues to be an issue. So yes, the self-service portal for sure is a good step in the right direction to help alleviate the issue.
We asked you all, how long does it typically take to fully onboard a new supplier? 34% of you said it takes between 1 and 3 days. 28% of you says it takes between 4 and 7 days. 1 in 5 of you say it takes over a week. Only 4% of you say it takes less than 1 day. Noel, how long should it take to fully onboard a new supplier?
I would probably, depending on what information, how they're going to be paid, if it's something like a check payment, should be less than a day. However, something like ACH, where things need to be verified, takes a little bit of time to do that. That's generally between 1 and 3 days. I wouldn't expect any supplier onboarding unless there's additional compliances for your industry, as I mentioned earlier, like certificates of insurance, collecting tax details like a W-9, things like that. If there's additional documents behind the scenes, it's likely going to take up to 7 days, but that's all dependent on how quick the communication can happen between you and the vendor. Which is really, really important to make sure you kind of have a one and done type of situation where they can really get all those details in and completed for you within one opportunity.
Noel, it's interesting because I know we focus on supplier onboarding, and it's a big burden for organizations, but it seems to me that managing changes to vendor information is becoming more onerous these days. Talk to me about that and the risks of not doing it right.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, things can change. It can be something where, you sent a check out. We had one address on it, but however they moved and didn't inform you of that, and they didn't put it, within a portal or something similar to that. Do you have that kind of system that's going to see that, return those funds back to you, where you have control, or do you have to wait X amount of days to be able to do that, to get those funds back to pick that up? So it's something where that can definitely be a wrench in your plans and in your cash flow, as well as the vendor's cash flow and that relationship you have with them.
Yeah, that awesome. If you haven't been sending in your questions, I encourage you to do so. Just fire up your Q&A tool on your screen to submit your questions to me now. We will answer as many questions as time allows. Colleen writes in, Andy, ACH is best if you get a discount for early payment. You agree with Colleen?
I do agree with Colleen. Yes. Early pay discounts are fairly common, and yeah, I would say, but although not necessarily standard for ACH, right? You're getting paid quicker. You're receiving your funds quicker, and is not every ACH is tied to an early pay discount.
You anticipated my follow-up question. What are we seeing with early payment discounts? Are more suppliers offering them as right on the invoice? Are more discounts being negotiated on the front end? Are we seeing more dynamic discounts because the markets have been turbulent? What's happening, Andy, when it comes to discounts these days?
Yeah. What I see is generally they're determined up front, and part of contracting. That's for the most part where I'm seeing early pay discounts happen.
Actually, Haley just wrote in. She says, so how do you encourage suppliers to offer a discount? Andy, any thoughts on that?
Generally, it's a practice that either they utilize or don't. I would find it probably difficult to talk a supplier into offering a discount if it's not something that they do as standard. Certainly can be something to ask for, but if it's not part of their practice, it may be a tough conversation to have.
Noel, I know a few years back, dynamic discounting was kind of the rage, right? This idea of as soon as those invoices are approved, send that message to a supplier and say, hey, I could pay you quicker if you're willing to take a discount. Is that still a thing?
Yeah, absolutely. What I generally find in my years here at Bill is that it ebbs and flows as far as the request of offering dynamic discounts. And it really comes down to economic factors, whether it's industry specific or it's just the economy overall. This is something where now we're starting to see it more prevalent, more requests for that. And so vendors might be a little bit more open. Well, if I can get my cash flow to be a little bit quicker, I don't have to wait an extra 15, 21 days to get my payment. If I can get them to pay me a little bit faster, yeah, I'd be willing to take on a little bit of a percentage hit to get that done so I can keep my business up and flowing.
Colleen Casey writes in, do you have any tips for how to encourage suppliers to use a portal for submitting invoices? Even when telling them the benefit of transaction visibility, they're still reluctant to use a portal because they believe email is easier. Do you hear this from other AP leaders, and what's the solution?
There's definitely a lot of retraining that's required when suppliers and vendors start using the portal. I think that one benefit of a supplier portal is the chat communication within that company's workflow. So a lot of our customers, they've encouraged suppliers to go to the portal, not just for visibility, but because they get responses quicker using the chat in there than if they were to send, again, an email. We get thousands of emails a day, especially accounting teams who are working nonstop in 80-hour weeks. They're going to miss something. So the supplier portal allows them to have that quick communication back and forth so they can get their questions answered much faster.
Is portal fatigue a thing, Colleen?
It will be. It can be, right? I think that's why it's very important that you choose the right automation partner so that you don't have to leverage multiple different vendors to solve different business challenges, because you want to take your supplier experience into account. A lot of organizations like us on this call, like, we care about suppliers and their experience. And so, you don't want your suppliers logging into multiple different systems to get one thing done.
Yeah. Noel, any tips for getting suppliers to submit through a portal rather than through email or eGAD's paper?
Yeah, I mean, it's really about providing flexibility, giving the different options. Not one vendor is going to be the same, not one business is going to be the same. And sometimes you're able to standardize across all vendors, but there's probably going to be one or two that won't get with the program. So this is something where maybe you don't necessarily offer your email address, but you offer a different email address where there's an inbox that ingests the document that comes through. It's able to read the information automatically. Or if they do email it to you, you have a quick way just to drag and drop that into that system. Or if it's a physical invoice, you have a mobile app that you can take a picture of it and have it uploaded. Just some sort of way to centralize that process. It's all going to the same inbox or the same place, but it may be coming from different mediums.
Andy, is there a point at which we just stop offering the ability to send in paper invoices, or maybe even to an email box if you do have a portal or a network?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure it ever fully goes away. And the one thing I do just want to add to this conversation is that anytime you're implementing something new or changing a process, like, organizations are resistant to change. And when you're talking about hundreds, sometimes thousands of vendors that you're asking to change a process, you're going to get some pushback. I do think it just goes back to the sort of the conversation up front around keeping that North Star and understanding why you're doing this, and that you're going to have some of these potentially difficult conversations with vendors. But if you're gaining significant efficiencies and making your organization better overall, generally worth it in the end.
Yeah, David writes in, we're just getting going with a supplier portal. What are some tips to make sure a supplier actually completes the onboarding form? Andy, any thoughts on that?
Yeah. So I think a lot of that comes down to, and I don't know if the cart's left the barn here yet, but the communication up front and sending out advance notice that there's a change coming. That is, like, by far best practice on our side, in sort of communicating up front and giving a little advance notice that there's a change coming. That's probably the best practice, I would say, and making sure you're communicating with all your vendors.
That brings us to our next poll question, which is now displayed on your screen. We want to know, what's the single biggest bottleneck in your current invoice process? What's the single biggest bottleneck in your current invoice process? Is it manual data entry? Is it routing for approval? Is it matching POs to invoices? Is it managing exceptions, or is it tracking invoice status? I did not put all of the above here. You must pick just one. I know they could all be onerous. Take a moment to respond to the poll question now displayed on your screen, and we'll discuss the results in just a moment. You know what, Noel? This is a record. It took us 57 minutes for somebody to submit a question about AI. I'm flabbergasted. I thought we'd be flooded with them by this point. But Sushil wants to know, what are the practical use cases you're seeing for using AI in accounts payable? How much is real and how much is aspirational? All right, Noel, give us everything we need to know about AI and AP in 2.5 minutes or less.
All right. One factor is it's not going to be replacing you, right? It is a tool for you to utilize to make yourself more efficient, is one thing. Now, of course, you're not going to go into a separate tool and be able to do that. What a lot of our systems are doing now is we're integrating AI. Kolleen mentioned earlier today about the OCR technology. This is something where, with that data with OCR, we can have AI create decisioning models with different AI agents to provide things like line item level reading with 99% accuracy, being able to predict your coding based off of that line item level reading of a specific vendor or a specific description, and tie that to your chart of count or however else you may have it coded. This is something where eventually, if you create policies, or it may learn what your approval policies are and automatically route the approval, where really the process becomes submit the document and AI takes care of the rest. Then you go on through your approvals and payments thereafter. So I think that's really, we're going to see a lot of the tools, and of course in analytics with that data, being able to pull that via AI and be able to better serve the rest of the company just for our financial operations teams.
When I read between the lines of Sushil's question, though, I'm kind of thinking he's skeptical of how much of this is already going on. Of everything you just described, Noel, I mean, how much of that's already happening today?
Yeah, there's some that have really jumped the gun on it. They really jumped on it, especially younger companies. They're jumping on it. They want to get right into it. They're very enthusiastic about AI because AI is making it easy for them to go to market. Whereas some that have been around, they have some tech debt that, of course, they need to catch up on, but infuse AI into that and create further innovations. And with a larger amount of customers, might take a little bit more time. But I really don't see it as something where it's going to be right up in your face. You're going to see, oh, that was cool. It kind of automated for me. That's AI kind of in the background for you.
You agree with that, Kolleen?
I do. I think a lot of it's already here, and a lot of it is in the predictive AI, right? Where, hey, we have access to the data now, so we can start presenting information saying, hey, you've received an invoice from Dell for the last 12 months and you didn't get one this month. That's going to alert somebody and say, we expect this, right? And that's where we see AI going, is really helping the teams continue to make better decisions, leveraging their data around fraud control, right? Hey, this invoice looks different than the last 26 from this supplier. Format might be a little bit different, but there's something unique. We need to flag it. That's where AI is super powerful within an automated solution.
Earlier,
Maybe
you mentioned,
be able to utilize. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Noel.
I was going to say, Mark, you also can be able to utilize AI to determine things like spoof emails. Is this really banking information? Is this possibly a fraud attempt? AI will be able to detect those things or assist with detecting those things.
You know, Noel, to this point, and I hope I don't forget my question because I'll never forgive you for this. But to this point, I just learned this week that fake T&E receipts are now a thing. Have you heard this? People are using AI to create phony business expense receipts to submit and, obviously get paid on. But now AI can also detect whether the receipt was a phony if it's integrated into the T&E processing solution.
Correct.
Really cunning how people are finding ways to pull one over on companies, and amazing how these technologies can help level the playing field. Kolleen, what's the biggest misperception about AI in accounts payable?
I think that it'll do everything that an accounting person can do, right? It can get a lot of those mundane tasks accomplished, and it can start, to Noel's point, right, making decisions on where things should be routed or who they need to go to. But at the end of the day, it's never going to take the role of an accounting person who needs to make a decision about the business. And it shouldn't, because a lot of times AI, it's only matching based on trends, decisions, and the data that it has. But if you're getting new suppliers and information, that changes a little bit. So it's never going to completely replace a final decision maker.
Yeah. Andy, there are a lot of AI-powered solutions on the market these days. Everybody's solution has suddenly apparently become powered by AI. How can I tell if a solution I'm looking at is really using AI or if it's just marketing speak?
That's a good question, Mark. I think so. Generally, most of the payment solutions out there, fintechs are utilizing some level of AI. But again, like I go back to a lot of what we're doing from like a pay file. A lot of it is file based, right? And AI is just sort of sprinkled in. But on some level, I would say at this point, every fintech and every partner and every potential vendor in the space is utilizing AI on some level.
All right, we asked our attendees, what's the biggest bottleneck in your current invoice process? 36% of our attendees said manual data entry. It's the task that AP leaders would like to eliminate the most from their job, or would most like to eliminate. There we go. Would most like to eliminate from their jobs. Manual data entry. 27% of our attendees said routing for approval. 24% said managing exceptions. To me, routing for approval and managing exceptions kind of goes hand in hand. 36% of our attendees said manual data entry is the biggest bottleneck. Kolleen, does that surprise you?
It doesn't, because this is one of the most painful parts of the process, but I think it's exciting because this is also the one area that automation has the largest impact on. When you start leveraging smart capture and AI, I mean, you're looking, as Noel said, at 99% upwards accuracy. So this part here, automation completely eliminates the need for somebody to have to do manual data entry.
Yeah, no, my friend Kolleen is really excited about the possibility of AI and automation eliminating all this manual data entry. It seems to me that about 20 years ago, a technology called OCR came out, which was promising, well, the same thing. What's different this time with AI versus OCR?
You know that term, Mark, where like it's ahead of its time? I think that's really what we had with OCR. OCR natively is a static technology. So it was just going based off of what you told it to do. It wasn't making any decisions. It wasn't looking anywhere else. You kind of had to map it and maintain it there forward. But with something like AI, AI can take that data. AI can take the point where you clicked and found out where you picked that data up from. Hey, I don't grab the invoice number from here. I grab it from this number over here, and it learns that over time. That's something where an AI taught OCR really comes into play. And I think that's pretty much general within the market for the most part. Yeah.
All right, Noel, Lavetta wants to know, what AP functions do you believe should have dual or multi-level approval?
AP functions that should have multi-level approval.
Dual or multi-level approval, that's right.
Sure. So as far as dual approval goes, I would probably recommend that on administrative actions. That's changing a vendor's bank account, adding a new user within the platform, changing roles. That's more of a dual control. This way, you don't have an all-powerful administrator that if they go rogue can completely shut you out of the system, and have additional approvals behind that. Other areas as far as multi-level approvals can happen on the bill. I think that's probably because most of your data is there on the bill in that manual entry or automated entry, where maybe your approvals are based off of departments and amounts or chart of accounts or a certain vendor, and it can automatically set up those approvals for you based off of how that bill gets coded.
Colleen LaMichelle writes, and pardon me if I've mispronounced your name, LaMichelle. What are some strategies for better communicating with approvers? I think you mentioned this earlier, Kolleen, that automation can help us with approvers. Are there any strategies for communicating with them? I assume LaMichelle's insinuating that email and unreturned phone calls just aren't working.
Right. No, there's many strategies, right? Email notifications are definitely helpful, but also having in-app or in-application chat function makes it very easy for people to log in and see all the work that they need to. But also highlighting reports, right? Highlighting where things are in the process and who the bottlenecks are really help drive communication between approvers as well as suppliers. So leveraging automation really does help get approvers making decisions quicker, because they now have visibility into it, which we found more than anything. It's not that they want to delay approvals, it's that they just don't have visibility or they let it slip through the cracks.
Yeah. Andy, Connie's wondering about cross-border payments, payments to global suppliers. Any way to make that process easier?
Well, I will I will say from my seat, we deal solely with domestic payments, so I may not have the best answer for Connie.
Noel, any best practices you could share with her?
Yeah, I mean, for how some vendors out there manage, of course, your supplier onboarding, especially for international, they may have the same system where they can invite that vendor to allow them to enter in their international wire information, and having that flexibility. Well, do I want to be paid in local currency? Do I want to be paid in US dollar? Do I need my invoice in a certain currency? Either they can set up, or they can do the initial setup and you can come back and edit those details depending on what you need specifically. But having possibly a tool that's dedicated to those international vendors, so you have that correct information where it asks for the proper wire information to complete, is likely what you want to be looking for.
That brings us to our next poll question, which is now displayed on your screen. This time I want to know, what percentage of your invoices are processed straight through without any manual intervention? What percentage of your invoices are processed straight through, posted to your ERP, ready to pay without anyone having to lift a finger? Between 0 and 25% of them, you're handling most of them. 26 to 50% of them are processed straight through. Between 51% and 75% of the invoices you receive are processed straight through. Between 76% and 100% of your invoices are processed straight through, or you don't know. Take a moment to respond to the poll question now displayed in your screen, and we'll discuss the results in just a moment. Kolleen, what's the number one reason that organizations have to manually handle these invoices they're receiving from suppliers?
Mismatching to the PO data. And I think I love this question because, we'll work with organizations and they'll say, what's your straight through processing rate? And the reality is this is completely dependent on the organization we're working with, because suppliers are sending the invoice and we have no control over that. But what we do is we really engage the suppliers within the workflow, and you start sending them notifications saying, hey, you've got to upload a new invoice because this is inaccurate. And you put the work back on them. And then the next time they come to send the invoice, they're going to do a double check to make sure things match up so that they don't have to get involved. But, a lot of this really does come back to training the suppliers to send the right information or involving them easily in the workflow so that if they do need to upload a new invoice or make some corrections, it doesn't take multiple people or phone calls or emails.
Yeah, Andy, what advice would you give to our attendees to help drive up the number of invoices that are posted directly to their ERP without anyone having to deal with them?
Yeah, I would say I think to Colleen's point, involving the supplier is key to getting these invoices pushed straight through. I do think automating and utilizing a portal where you do have the ability to, like I had said before, set some rules around what gets auto paid and what actually does need to be bubbled up for approval. I think that's also a strategy organizations can utilize.
Yeah, interestingly, Noel, Jennifer just wrote in that one of her challenges is POs being approved and received in a timely fashion. Interesting how all this stuff keeps going even upstream in some cases. Any insights there on how we can streamline that PO process to get the AP process moving a little more easily?
Yeah, I think just in general approvals overall, and I know I've been talking quite a bit about flexibility, but having different mediums to allow them, different ways to get them notified, whether it's text, in Slack, being notified via email, get a push notification on your mobile app. Those are all areas to really help that out. So if you're able to get something where, hey, I just send out emails and they're just not replying, or hey, we have a system and they're still not getting the approvals done, maybe it's time to consider a different medium. Maybe if it's something like on their actual personal mobile device and they get a push notification and it's kind of annoying, they're going to go in and get it taken care of.
Yeah, Colleen, Felicia just wrote in and said, hey, any tips for driving the percentage of invoices that are tied to a PO? So we're going to have this communication with suppliers, but presumably there's some internal things we can do as well. Talk to me about that.
Yeah, so especially with PO-based invoices, and again, you might be working with suppliers for 20 plus years, and we work with customers who are like, you know what, the supplier, their price changes, let's set thresholds up where if it's within 5% of what we agree to, go ahead and just push it through because that price changes. So it helps drive up the straight through processing rates because companies know that this isn't a static price for an item, but it's working with those suppliers to understand what that looks like and then putting those thresholds in the internal process to support it.
Yeah. Andy, David's wondering whether there's some things he should be looking for in a solution to help it ensure that it will scale to support his organization's growth. This is a really good question by David, right? We often think about our current needs and forget about what's likely to happen down the road. What are some things I should be looking for in a solution to make sure that it's going to be foundational?
Sure. I do think part of that is understanding who are the market leaders in the space. Who do they partner with? In a lot of cases, look, I might be biased here, but we work with a lot of banks. Like I said, if a bank has gone out and done the due diligence and done the work, and they have partnered with and selected a solution as their sort of the white label, that's probably a pretty good indication that that's an organization that can grow with its customers.
We asked our attendees what percentage of your invoices are processed straight through without manual intervention. Look at this. You three have a lot of work to do here. 65% of our attendees, 2/3 of them, say that between 0 and 25% of the invoices they receive are processed straight through without manual intervention. Another 13% of our attendees say between 26 and 50%. Put it all together, what is that? 3/4? I went to public school, sorry. 3/4 of our attendees are manually handling most of the invoices they receive. Kolleen, this is horrifying to you, isn't it?
You know, they're not alone. We hear this all the time. You know, a lot of people found quick solutions, or they've gone digital, which is a great first step, but they're still touching almost every single invoice. And, you know, as we talked about OCR before as well, that's an area we see that organizations have started leveraging it. But, you know, even if it's automating 80%, they're still having to touch 20% of their invoices before it even gets to automation. So not surprised by this at all. And it just means that there's opportunity to continue to improve that process.
Yeah. No, what are the things we should be asking about in a prospective AP solution to help ensure that it will support that level of straight through processing we're looking for? Are there certain telltale signs of a system that will actually drive that touch-free processing versus those that are just going to eliminate some of our touches?
Yeah, absolutely. I would look for things like autosave functionality, where, you know, going to be the same bill every single time that document comes through, it's going to process straight through, go right to approval. Or if it's something where maybe you're purchase order based and the data is already there within that system, are they going to be able to automatically read the quantity? Are they going to be able to read the unit cost, the purchase order number, and automatically get that through for you as well? So those are a couple of areas you could definitely look into. I believe as line item level reading with AI becomes a little bit more prevalent, we're probably going to see that percentage increase where it's going to be much more straight through processing. And I think that's really what it comes down to, is making sure that coding is accurate.
Stay right there, Noel. Barrett writes in, from the T&E side of the house, how long are most companies taking to reimburse employees, and where can efficiencies be gained from this process? T&E processing still stinks for most companies, doesn't it, Noel?
It does. It does. And as you mentioned earlier about the AI spoofing of T&E receipts, right? This is something where, you know, if you're going to have that manual expense reporting, you're going to reimburse, you figure that's going to slow down your end of month process as well. You might be week 2 into the new month and still closing out the previous month. You're going to have to do it all over again in about a week and a half. So this is something where using a spend and expense management tool might be beneficial, where you have control over the spend, the transactions come over in real time. The receipts that get brought in are using OCR technology to validate what's already there, which is going to be, you know, merchant name, the amount. You can even get level 2 data if you wanted to on top of it. So it's possible you may want to look into a spend and expense solution. I think that's also a technology that's ahead of its time, as we're seeing with AI being able to spoof receipts.
Andy, Tristan wrote in, we started charging vendors a fee to issue them a check, but offer a cost-free ACH payment. More vendors started to move to ACH. Of course, there are limitations, but we found this to be a good way to get vendors off check. How do you feel about this approach, Andy?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. That's a new one for me. I've heard of the fees to accept the virtual card, or a different, like a rebate fee-based ACH. But the other way, to go to fee for check, is a little different. For me, the strategy that is most prevalent is like we had said, the stepped different payment timings. But that's a new one. That's a new one for me.
Yeah, Mark, just to add on that.
Go ahead.
Just to add on that, that's something we see with our accounting firms all the time, especially for their smaller businesses that they manage. They will charge some sort of fee. It might just be covering the check fee, essentially, that maybe a system might charge. So that we're generally seeing that on our end.
Are we talking $5? Are we talking $25? What are we talking here?
Yeah, sometimes it's $5. I think the most I've ever seen was maybe like $10, and that really got them to move quite a bit. They don't want to have to pay the extra, take off $10 extra. It's almost like providing a discount in some cases.
Yeah, interesting. That brings us to our next poll question, which is now displayed on your screen. This time, I want to know, what's your organization's most common method for paying suppliers? What's your organization's most common method for paying suppliers? Are you using paper checks for most of your payments to suppliers? Are you using ACH for most of your payments to suppliers? Are you using ACH Plus or network payments for most of your payments to suppliers? Using virtual cards or using wire transfers? Take a moment to respond to the poll question now displayed on your screen, and we'll discuss the results in just a moment. Andy, when I'm trying to figure out my payment mix, are there some rules of thumb for what types of use cases certain payment methods are better suited for?
Yeah. So yeah, I think it's, as we've evolved in the payment space, right, and we're moving more towards automation. I think every organization, well, for the most part, every organization has some level of each automation versus paper check versus virtual card and wires. Actually, I just spoke with a property manager this week who is still 100% paying vendors by check. Very interesting. I think this varies. To me, it tends to vary across industry and space. Like generally, enterprise clients tend to be a little bit more automated. They're seeing, they're upwards of over 50%, 75, 80% automated, whereas different space developers, property managers, manufacturers, they may be a little less. And then we're sort of seeing in mid-market and small business, right? They tend to be a little bit more tied to check. But certainly, I think it varies across types of business and business segment.
Andy, Marie just wrote in, what's the difference between ACH and ACH Plus?
Well, so from our space, their ACH Plus is a vendor fee-based payment type where there's some richer remittance and potential for remittance data to flow back directly into an ERP system. So it's essentially a lower cost virtual card, but it's an ACH payment.
Robin gets
and
the award.
Is the remittance data they're getting back.
Robin gets the award for the most timely question. Robin writes in, how do I allocate, any suggestions for allocating those tariff charges that are starting to appear on invoices? Noel, are you hearing more about these tariff charges, and how do we deal with those from an automation standpoint?
I haven't necessarily run into too many tariff charges. I know that we're running into some situations with nonprofits and grant funding and things like that. As far as tariff charges, what I might recommend for that is probably either going to have to be included, or if you're looking to really manage what you're really looking at as far as how much you're paying on tariffs, you may want to create a separate account for that within your accounting, or even classify an expense that, hey, this was like a 10% tariff here, that's a 20% tariff there. Be able to use that classification. So when you run into your ERP, you can run a report under that classification. But if you really want a ledger for it, then it may be best for you to create a chart of account and then code to that.
Kolleen, Robin's question got me thinking. One of the big challenges with posting invoices straight through with touch-free is things like freight charges or sales tax that show up, things we didn't necessarily anticipate or might be variable. How does automation help us account for things like that, as well as, say, a tariff charge?
Yeah, and this is something we're actually seeing a lot more on is tariffs, especially because we work with organizations who are shipping things all over. So one, automation helps because you can put in those rules to say every time you see a line item that has tax or freight, automatically apply it to this specific GL, right? That's the most common thing we see. Right now, a request we're seeing related to tariffs is our customers saying, hey, we want to start tracking how much we're spending on tariffs related to each supplier. So not just setting up automation to automatically apply those to a specific GL so that it can go straight through, but then also having reports built out to give visibility to our customers to show, hey, here's what this looks like, and here's the spend, and here's how it's impacting your bottom line.
Yeah, we asked our attendees, what's your organization's most common method for paying suppliers? About 2/3 are using ACH as the most common method for paying suppliers. But look at this, to Andy's point from just a few moments ago, 23% of you still are mostly paper check payments to suppliers. Let's do one more poll question under the wire here. This time I want to know, what is your biggest frustration with your current payment process? We've already established how it is you're paying them. Now let's find out how you feel about it. What's your biggest frustration with your current payment process? Is it too many manual steps, high processing costs? Is it missed early payment discounts or rebates? Is it poor visibility or reporting? Is it complaints from your suppliers? They never complain. Is it high risk of fraud? Or is it something else? Take a moment to respond to the poll question now displayed on your screen. We'll discuss the results in just a moment. While they're doing that, Pamela just wrote in, our company pushes for ACH. However, I have a problem with some suppliers' AR departments not knowing how to post our payments properly. So I end up putting them back on check. Oh, Andy, what advice can we give Miss Pamela so she can stop cutting all those paper checks?
Yeah, that's frustrating. I guess I'm not sure how I would how I would advise Angela on that.
Noel, any hope for Pamela here?
Yeah, absolutely. Likely finding something that can send the remittance detail directly to the vendor. And of course, that memo field showing up in their bank statement, that's something that's also important. Because generally what should be on that memo field is typically the invoice number that's being paid. But also if you have an account number with them, especially that account number, I think that's really important, because if they can't locate the invoice, at least they can look up your account and be able to know how to apply that payment appropriately.
Yeah, Colleen, I think the worst case scenario would be moving back to check. Any other advice for Ms. Pamela?
No, nailed it, right? I think that communication to the supplier is critical, right? Giving them a heads up, hey, this ACH payment is on the way, communicating with them so that they're aware of it, the supporting information and details so that they can validate it. That's what's really going to allow them to most easily process that payment.
We asked you, what is your biggest frustration with your current payment process? 52% of you said you've got too many manual steps, high processing costs. I bet they have too many checks, Colleen. That's my guess, right?
Oh, yeah. They're the most manual, require a lot of individuals to get them out the door, and they take a long time.
Colleen, what's your single biggest piece of advice you'd give to folks for evaluating AP automation providers?
Just get started. I think that, a lot of it, there's a lot of suppliers and vendors in the market now that can help solve many of the areas of AP automation. And I think the most important part is understanding your specific requirements that'll make an impact within your organization, and then just start talking to people within your industry.
Yeah. Noel, what's your single biggest piece of advice for evaluating AP automation providers?
Have a lot of inclusion. Get your teams involved, because that's where you're going to get your buy-in. You find out what the issues they're having with how they interact with the finance team, and finding those pain points for them. That way they can advocate for you when you do find those automation tools that will make things easier for them.
Andy, what's your single biggest piece of advice you'd give to our attendees for evaluating AP automation providers?
I think Noel started to hit on it a little bit. First, I think get aligned within your organization, right? And understand, make sure you're all on the same page as far as what goals and priorities are. And then I would say lean on existing partnerships and trusted relationships, and find market leaders that can help you achieve those priorities.
Colleen, what do you think will be the big story in accounts payable over the next year that our attendees need to prepare for?
I think that, it's interesting. When I started 10 years ago, I had to educate organizations on what AP automation was. And now everybody comes saying, we need AP automation, right? I think that in the next 5 years, we're going to be in a place where most organizations have automated in some capacity. And so they need to be prepared for thinking about that next level of automation and how to continually evolve as the organization grows.
Yeah, same question, What do you think is going to be the big story in accounts payable over the next year that our attendees need to prepare for?
Yeah, the big story that we're already seeing right now is AI, and we're going to see more adoption of AI within the platforms, helping with that automation, helping with auto coding or whatever you're looking to do. There's going to be some form of AI. And I think what we're going to see is it's going to seem very fragmented. You may have one system's really good at this with AI, another system's good with that with AI. But over time, over the next 5 years, then I would see those kind of culminating and being a little bit more unified.
Andy, what do you think is going to be the big story in accounts payable over the next year that our attendees need to prepare for?
Yeah, yep. So I think Noel's right there with the AI piece, but unfortunately, I do think how we're trending is the evolution of fraud and working to fight and stop that. I think sadly that's becoming a huge story. Not becoming, it is, and will continue to be.
Yeah, Andy, bringing in the reality there. That is something that will happen as more tools and more efficiencies come along. There's more opportunities for AI to be utilized for fraud.
And that will be our final word. Kolleen, Noel, Andy, thank you so much for an excellent virtual town hall meeting today. And thank all of you for taking time out of your busy days to join us. That's all the time we have for today's conversation, but that doesn't have to be the end of the discussion. If you have other questions that you'd like answered, well, we encourage you to reach out to our panelists and they'd be happy to share their expertise with you. What's more, we invite you to visit the IOFM website. For members, you'll find a wealth of resources on the types of topics that we discussed today. For just a small annual fee, you'll be able to get lots of resources, timely articles, and even the opportunity to ask other experts answers to your questions. On behalf of IOFM, this is Mark Brousseau. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. Hope to speak with you all again soon.